The Godfather is one of the most captivating, engaging, and thought-provoking stories ever portrayed on film. And while yes, it was a book first, it was the movie that really made it the cultural phenomenon that it is today. And one of the main reasons the story captured the minds of millions is because it takes some of the biggest questions we have of the world, society, and geopolitics, and shrinks it down to a local level, and focuses the story on one family. And the story perhaps offers the best answer for why the world needs bad people. As we all know, the Corleone family aren't necessarily good people, as they commit some pretty heinous crimes. However, as we can understand why each crime is committed, and see that it was perhaps done for the greater good, it makes us question if perhaps bad people are in a way necessary for a society to function with order and stability. And perhaps one immoral action can help prevent hundreds of other immoral actions and prevent the decline of society as we know it. As the movie makes us think whether Michael Corleone perhaps sacrifices his own morality so that hundreds of others don't have to and get to live in a good world. And so in this video, we'll go over why society forces some good people to have to become evil, and why a world without evil is not necessarily a world you want. Starting with 1, why society forces good people to become evil. At the very beginning of The Godfather, we are introduced to Michael Corleone, who is a young war hero who has just returned home from the military and is looking to settle down with his partner and live a good, quiet life away from the lies, corruption, and crimes of his family. But as tensions rise between the 5 crime families of New York City, certain actions are taken against the Corleone family and Michael's own father, Don Vito Corleone. And these specific actions force Michael's hand in helping out his family in order to avoid the whole community that his family protects falling apart. Simply put, Michael has to make certain sacrifices in order for his future self, his friends, and girlfriend to live in a stable world. But the very fact that he is putting the life and morality of his friends, community, and family ahead of his makes him the obvious heir to the throne of the Corleone crime empire. And it is quite literally because he is a good person that he falls deeper into corruption and evil. And Michael's origin story closely resembles the origin story of the Italian mafia families in the first place, as they were formed as a way of protecting the Italian immigrant communities that were being abused and treated unfairly by the government. So the very foundations that the mafia was built on was goodness, which of course led to an abundance of corruption and power. However, it was seen as a sacrifice so that most people could live a good, moral life away from evil. And that's what makes this movie so interesting, because it shows that the role of the mafia is quite literally the same as the role of a president or a government, where we as people entrust them with sacrificing their own morality in order to protect ours. And quite often, as we see with Michael in The Godfather Part 2, we as commoners of society abuse these leaders and take for granted their sacrifices, as Michael's own wife grows to resent him due to him being a part of the mafia life, and she ends up abandoning him and takes his children away. And while yes, that is understandable, and she isn't necessarily a bad person for doing that, however, there wasn't one moment in Michael's life where he put himself or his own power ahead of others, including his wife and children, as every action he ever took was to give them a better life and keep them away from the corruption and evil that exists in the world. As Michael believed that evil has always existed and would always exist, and so in his mind the best thing to do was keep as many people away from it, especially those that he loved. However, that decision to keep people away from evil by sacrificing his own morality only worked to drive them further away from him, and he ended up losing the very people he loved dearly and the very people he was protecting. And when this moment happens, it leaves us as audience members asking if Michael is truly an evil person, or if he is, as he would see himself, a victim of circumstance. And when we ask ourselves what society in The Godfather would look like without Michael's personal sacrifice, we can't help but see it as a more unstable, cruel, and corrupt world, as Michael Corleone actively fights for stability and is constantly trying to move his family into a legitimate business that's no longer a part of the crime world. Yet as Michael understands himself, there will always be people who just want money and power and will abuse anyone to have it. Therefore, there has to be people who can combat against that, but the only way you can do so is by committing evilness yourself. And it seems Mario Puzo and Francis Ford Coppola perhaps make the best argument here for why society can't necessarily function without bad people. 2. Why a world without evil is not a good one. One of the most repeated themes throughout The Godfather is that there isn't just one world, and that everyone lives in their own world. For some, their world has zero evil, for others, the only world they know is evil. And it truly is a big wake-up call for all of us, that if in our world we see no evil at all, and see no capacity within ourselves to be evil, we have probably been corrupted by evil. As humans are complex and we can't even understand ourselves fully, let alone understand others. And so if we make the choice to remain naive to the fact that we can be corrupted ourselves or can fall prey to evil forces, we will be easily fooled by those who have no restraint from being evil, and by those who want to actively corrupt us in order to grow their own evil empire and achieve whatever personal gain they want to achieve. Because most people in the world don't necessarily want to be bad, but as Michael knew, there are and always will be people who are perfectly happy to be bad, and they will manipulate anyone into joining their evil force, as there are numerous characters throughout The Godfather that believe that they are good, but in reality they have just been manipulated by a far more corrupt force, as we see when Michael's wife Kay believes that Michael and his mafia family are the sources of evil in the world, as opposed to just a response to the evil that had already existed and would always exist in the world. Because the government will continue with their own actions of self-interest that will hurt the very people that the Corleone family tries to protect, while trying to frame the Corleone family as the sources of evil in the country and making it seem like they are only trying to eradicate it. And while Kay is not necessarily a bad person at all, she is easily manipulated due to her lack of willingness to see that evil is everywhere and could even be a part of her. However, it is important to stress that there are also members of the mafia that are also just out for their own self-interest, and they use the framing of being the neighborhood protectors to make themselves seem noble, when in fact they are just greedy, evil people. But Michael himself, while it certainly is up for debate, doesn't seem to be framed that way throughout the trilogy. And in the end of it all, it's really just a sad tale of a good man who had to become evil to protect the people he loved in order to remain a good person, as it seems to be a sort of religious parable on how we all live in a fallen world ruled by the devil himself, and perhaps some good people sacrifice their morality so that most of us can ascend into heaven as good, noble people. However, to end the video, I do want to say that I don't necessarily agree on all the points that The Godfather makes, as there are various points that I touch on in this video that I don't necessarily agree with. However, it is by far one of the most interesting films of our time, and it is my favorite film for that fact. But what are your thoughts on The Godfather? What are your thoughts on the overall character arc of Michael Corleone? Let me know down below in the comments, and if you liked the video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and as always, take care.